Adult Children of Alcoholics is a book that my friend said in our book club. He said it's sort of like an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting if it were a book. I think that's a really great description, as it's basically focused on speaking about what it was like growing up under the family of an alcoholic, and then what you might experience now in your adult life having come from that. So, for example, one of the big tenets is that adult children of alcoholic parents does adult children of alcoholics, AOCs, is that right? Adult ACOCs do not know what is normal. So they're living their life, and then an ACOC will not know how to react to certain things, or how to get mad, or how to punish their children in ways that are normal. And so I think that's all very interesting. And then there's another element to it as well, which is it's talking a lot about the secrecy surrounding what it means to be an ACOC, because alcoholism is not a very talked about thing. It's something that is sort of suffered in silence. And so there was a lot of interesting quotes that stood out to me. But one of them in particular was this idea that being a ACOC is sort of like being a closeted queer child, in the sense that there's this part of your life that you can't share publicly. It's a little bit of a secret. And I thought that was a really interesting parallel. There's a few other standout lines. In particular, she says, or the author of the story says, "The light at the end of the tunnel is a headlamp for an oncoming train." I think that's lovely and quite figurative. Then there's also this concept of, there's just many vignettes in the narrative. So constantly in the book, which is not a narrative, it's a nonfiction piece, but the way it's structured, it will constantly read, as my friend said, sort of like a horoscope, where it's explaining, as an ACOC, you may have experienced life like this, or you may have experienced life like this. And sometimes it's a little bit silly, in the sense that the book says, oh, in the classroom, an ACOC may have been the quiet child, or they may have also been the boisterous, loud child. And so what my friend said is, hey, that's like every kind of child you could be. Am I an adult child of an alcoholic? Because it's a little bit inclusive. And so I think in some ways the book is sort of over-accommodating to all the different things that could happen. And it did feel like, yes, almost anybody could be an ACOC around us. But I thought that was interesting. I guess as somebody who's not an ACOC, one of the big things that I took away from this is I'm constantly saying, oh, how might this inform a story that I might write about somebody who's experiencing something like this? Or how might it inform me when I'm having a conversation with a relative or a friend who might disclose to me that they are an ACOC? And then even more broadly, it does not say that it's only for children of alcoholic parents, but in general, it's children of addicted parents. So alcoholism is just one of many kind of addictions. And so I think really anybody with a substance addiction can find a relationship to this text, because it's sort of generic. There's nothing specific about alcohol that makes this text, special. It really could have been, an opioid addiction or any other kind of thing. There was not a real scientific basis. So a lot of the books we've been reading in this book club have had great scientific studies to back them up. This book has almost nothing of the sort. And to some degree, it's stated that, right? It's saying that children of alcoholics is almost never studied. We've looked at alcoholics. We've looked at the spouses of alcoholics, but we haven't looked very much at the children of an alcoholic. And so it's sort of saying this is a new area and we need more studies there and more literature there. But the book itself does not present any studies or really scientific backing to the claims it's making. There's also something interesting. I remember when I was growing up, they say if you grow up in the city, an urban area versus a suburbia, which is akin to where I grew up, that you grow up faster. And I think that's quite fascinating, this idea that growing up is something that can be accelerated. And I believe that being an adult, an ACOC, will accelerate the speed at which a child grows, right? They talked about this a little bit, of how, a child often is taking the role of the parent that is the alcoholic, because they're not responsible and they're not fixing maybe they're not cooking, for example, or maybe they're not holding the other children accountable to do their schoolwork and things like that. So that's something my friend picked up on, and I thought it was quite interesting to address. Again, I'll say that there seems to be many stages of getting through alcoholism or getting through being an ACOC, and one of them seems to be acknowledgement, and then another one seems to be making a change. And this book is very much focused on the acknowledgement. It doesn't really address as much on what are we going to do in order to fix this, besides, go to an Alcoholic Anonymous meeting and talk about the problem. And then I think the last element that really caught my eye was, it reminded me of a Boy Scout meeting I went to, where I was in the Boy Scouts and somebody who had since graduated had said, oh, all the Boy Scouts in this troop, none of them are people I went to the troop with. However, I see that many of the personalities have stayed the same. And so while the faces may have changed, the personalities have stayed the same. They're still the class clown, the joker, the studious type. And in much the same vein, this book reflects that in an alcoholic family, the characters may be different, but the play remains the same. And so we see the way that, the way that the events transpire in these alcoholic families is often, many times it repeats the same patterns. And so I thought that was quite fascinating just to think about that. So overall, I wouldn't recommend this book. I said it was a 2 out of 5. I think on further reflection, my friend was speaking about that. It's probably a 1.5 out of 5. It's not a great book. I wouldn't recommend it. My other friend did say, though, that if you are a adult child of an alcoholic, you may get a ton more out of this than we did. And so perhaps if that's you, then this might be an interesting book. Again, it does sort of feel like an Alcoholic Anonymous meeting in a book form. So maybe if you've been thinking about going to a meeting like that and you want to see what would it be like to talk to somebody or to hear stories about what it's been like for other people to grow up as an ACOC, then I think this book may provide a lot of value to you. But for me and for folks who I think are not in that situation, this book doesn't really deliver a lot of value. Besides, I think, a fleeting perspective into what it may be like in so many ways, but what it may be like to be an ACOC, and particularly how that might affect the people around them and their worldview. So that is the review for this book. We'll be reviewing Shoe Dog very soon, but I just finished Sour Heart as well, and so I'll be reviewing that very soon. So let me know what you thought in the comments below if you read the book as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts.